Alrighty, looks like we are live again, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening for our Ask Me Anything. There we go. If you've been joining us over the last couple of weeks, you've probably seen that we've been doing a lot of interaction with the current roster of Libertarian presidential candidates. And so this week we are expanding that, and we're bringing in the vice presidential candidates as well. So for the next several Thursdays, we've got some awesome guests lined up that are running for the VP ticket in the Libertarian Party. Tonight we have Spike Cohen. His current running mate is Vermin Supreme. And I'm going to pass things over to Spike now. Please, any questions that you have for this VP candidate, just throw them in the comments on Facebook Live and we'll get them answered for you. All right, Mr. Cohen.
Hey, everybody. I am Spike Cohen, and I'm just finishing sharing this on my page, so people there will see it as well. So I apologize for that. Hey, everybody. I am Spike Cohen. I am running for the Libertarian Party nomination to be the next Vice President of the United States of America. For those who don't know me, I can tell you a little bit about myself. I am a business owner who started a website design company in my teens. I was 16 years old. I started it in the beginning of 1999. I sold that company just over 3 years ago now with the intention of spending my time on what my real passion is, which is sharing the message of liberty, self-ownership, non-aggression, and voluntary solutions over coerced ones, the libertarian message, to an audience that is largely outside of libertarian circles. So my idea was there are plenty of people that are talking inward to other libertarians, which is great. It's good for iron to sharpen iron, but I also believe that we need to do some outreach and use what I call nonlinear messaging, which is using humor and goodwill to spread a political message before people realize what they're hearing is a political message. And so I've been doing that for the better part of just over 3 years now. That started with my being the co-owner of Muddy Waters Media, the host of My Fellow Americans, and the co-host of the Muddy Waters of Freedom. In the end of last year, I was asked by Vermin Supreme and his team to run as Vermin Supreme's running mate. And so since December of last year, I have been running as the running mate to Vermin Supreme and running for the vice presidential nomination. I have been back before everything was shut down. I've been traveling to college campuses, traveling to housing projects, traveling to housing communities and neighborhoods of varying income levels, sharing the message door to door, campus to campus, person to person, group to group, crowd to crowd, sharing the message of liberty, which I believe is a very simple, empathetic message. You own yourself, you own your life, you own your body, you own your labor, you own your property, and no one should be able to take those things from you because you own them exclusively. And even if people call themselves the government and say that they have a claim to be able to take those things from you, they have no right to do that or to tell you what to do just because they put on a piece of paper that they have that authority. They don't have that authority. So that is the I guess the long and short of the message that I share with people as the libertarian message. And I think I've been doing a pretty good job of that as both just as the head of Muddy Waters Media, as just a general activist for liberty, and now as someone who's campaigning for the Libertarian Party's VP nomination. And with that, I will be looking to see if we have any calls first, or if we have any questions first. Let's see, Stephen Messina asks, politicians should always feel compelled to wear bulletproof vests when voting on anything that may influence our freedoms. Agree or disagree? I think politicians should probably be wearing them anyway. I think they may be. I think that before we have to worry about wearing bulletproof vests, we should just not have people voting on anything related to our freedoms. Our freedoms are sacrosanct. There's no reason for another individual to have some kind of say over what you do or don't do without your express consent to that. There are times when we will delegate a responsibility to someone else to tell us what the best idea is to do that, to do what we're doing. We've never given that assent to a politician. There are people who say, oh, well, if you've participated in the electoral system, then that means that you've given your assent for them to tell you and others what to do. We can't delegate a right that we ourselves don't have to someone else. right? So I'm not allowed to murder someone. If I hire someone to commit murder, I still don't have the right to do that. I'm not able to delegate a right I don't have. If we aren't allowed to rob from each other and take each other's property and tell each other what to do and put each other in cages and kill each other and take from each other and subjugate each other and all of those things, we aren't able to magically delegate that ability to someone else. So that entire idea is a farce. Let's see, they're coming in pretty. Ty Blaine asked, do you support or oppose tort reform? So here's an interesting thing about tort reform. Tort reform is the government essentially telling a jury that you can't charge more, that you can't reward more than a certain amount in damages. I think that the bigger problem here, what has caused the problem with malpractice, is that you have doctors, because of the way the system is set up and because there are so many regulations that are in place related to Medicare compliance, Medicaid compliance, and insurance compliance, what you have is a situation where doctors, it's been estimated somewhere between 30 and 70% of the cost of healthcare is directly related to compliance with red tape of some kind, either insurance red tape, Medicaid red tape, or Medicare red tape, or state red tape or federal red tape. And so you have doctors who, in order to be able to make a living, are having to do a ton more work because they're having to bring lots and lots more people in where they're getting a smaller and smaller amount of that. And it's like with anything, if you have to do something, if you have to deal with 5 people today, your odds of making a mistake are much lower than if you have to deal with 50 people today. Now, if you're now talking about something like being a doctor where you're doing surgeries or you're giving consultations on things that can and often are life and death, then the rate of malpractice goes through the roof. So I think that alone would fix the problem before you have to have the government stepping in and saying, you can't charge, you can't reward more than a certain amount. The problem with that is that what if the damages are more than that amount? What if they've arbitrarily set some amount based on what some lobbyist has told some politician to set it at, and now the damages are more than that? So I'm not a fan of that itself. I'm a fan of getting rid of the problems that created the issue of increasing malpractice insurance and increasing malpractice. Before we even get into the fact that it costs so much, why don't we actually try to reduce the amount of malpractice happening in the first place by eliminating the problems that are causing doctors that have to be so overworked in the first place, and therefore causing, most malpractice is mistakes. And so if we lighten the load so that they're not having to be so overworked, then, and this is a subject we could talk about because now more and more of them are working for health management companies and things like that, which exacerbates the problem even more. I have a lot of friends and a lot of people I've talked to in the medical field, and there are a tremendous number of problems that are causing them to be entirely overworked, which is causing more and more malpractice. So let's get rid of that problem so that A, we don't even have as much malpractice happening, so there aren't as many patients having problems in the first place, and B, we don't then have the problems that come as a side effect of that. Let's see here. Oh, wow, they're coming in hard. I probably need to take less time on these questions. Repeal the NFA, yes. No one has a right to tell you what kind or how many guns you should be able to have ever. That's an easy one. How would you approach criminal reform? I think, first of all, we need to get rid of any laws that criminalize victimless commerce, because that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about the drug trade or the sex trade or any of that, we're talking about commerce between consenting people who are choosing to give someone money in exchange for a drug or in exchange for sex work or whatever else. And whatever our personal feelings might be about that drug or about that type of sex work or whatever else, it's none of our business to go, and it's definitely none of the government's business to tell consenting people who are not harming each other that they can't engage in a certain type of thing. That alone would do quite a bit to end the over-policing in urban communities and the overcrowding of prisons and the whole prison industrial complex that's been created. There's this sort of pipeline from the military to the police to the prisons that can be eliminated just by doing that, getting rid of these minimum sentences. There are judges who begrudgingly have to hand out these absurd sentences for victimless crimes, sometimes crimes of possession, not even selling, but possession of drugs, rather than giving them the rehab that they actually need. If the government's going to be involved at all, let's look at this. I was just talking to someone today about this. Let's look at what the issue is. Most people that are dealing with an addiction to a substance, whether it's legal or illegal, it's usually a manifestation of hurt. either some kind of psychological trauma, physical trauma, pain, chronic pain issues. There's all sorts of things that are causing this. If the government would be involved at all, why wouldn't it be in trying to fix that problem by dealing with this person as what they are, someone who's hurting, rather than treating them as some kind of criminal that needs to be kept away from everyone for their safety? So that would be just those two things would be a tremendous thing. I would also get rid of the idea of civil asset forfeiture. The idea that the government can take from you without you ever having been tried and using that money. Man, I'm glad it warned me about my battery because I'm not plugged in. My computer's not plugged in. But so the idea that the government can take, that could have been bad, that the government can take from you before you've been convicted of anything or before you've even been tried. They can just take all your stuff, right at the time when you'd like to be able to hire an attorney and have no money for it. And they're actually using your money to finance your prosecution and hopeful for them, your conviction. So those would be great ways to deal with criminal reform. Who is your biggest libertarian influence? Wow. So I would definitely say I was one of the Ron Paul kids. And I've evolved quite a bit even from that since I've been in the libertarian movement, but he was definitely one of the big ones. And then from there, like reading Rothbard, reading Hayek, reading Bastiat, reading all of that stuff. Spooner was why I'm an anarchist now. So reading Spooner and how he applied the concept of contract law to dispute the idea that the government has any authority to tell us what to do because they signed a sheet of paper saying it, that we never gave our consent to that even the people that were alive now, only a tiny, tiny sliver of the people that were alive then gave any level of consent, and the rest were all forced into it. So I think Spooner was a big influence. Stirner. I've also read Proudhon, Bakunin, Kropotkin. I've read a lot of people even on the left side of the libertarian sphere. So a lot of influences, but I would definitely say that the first one that made me kind of open my eyes with the concept of blowback and things like that. Because up until then, I was sort of more of a neocon, we have to spread democracy around the world to, and they hate us for our freedoms and all that, Israel's our greatest ally and all that fun stuff. And having him say, yeah, no, that's all garbage, really made me start examining what I believed. That would have been, 10 years or so ago now. What's Vermin like in real life? Vermin Supreme, when he's not doing his character of a boot hat wearing time traveling wizard who's going to give everyone ponies and make everyone brush their teeth and kill baby Hitler and all that. Vermin Supreme is one of the most down to earth, kindest, easiest to talk to, approachable people you will ever meet in your life. And that's even if he's doing his persona. But even when he's not doing his character, he's an incredibly, incredibly kind man. I fell in love with the idea of being his running mate because I've been following him for, since I want to say it was 2008, the first time I heard of him. And I've been following him fairly heavily since 2012. And so I was, kind of starstruck. Meeting Vermin Supreme, the man, really drove home that I made the right choice in getting involved because he's just an incredible person. We could do an entire AMA about how great Vermin is. Let's see what else here. What is your view of unions, trade versus government? So I think the issue here is that you have government telling people that if they want to get into a certain line of work, they have to join a union. And I think that again, going back to the concept of self-ownership, if you own yourself, you own your body, you own your life, you own your labor, you should be able to use your labor however you wish. If you wish to unionize and do collective bargaining with a boss and refuse to do work unless it's under those terms, and enough people choose to do that, that can be very powerful. And in many cases, that can be a good thing. There have been cases where organized labor have been helpful with making sure that they got better conditions over time. With that said, if two things happen, if the government tells you that you can't get into a line of work, you can't use your labor unless you join an organization, which at that point basically becomes a government-sponsored organization. Two things happen. Number one, you've been robbed of your autonomy to make choices for what you want to do with your body, with your labor. And the other thing, the utilitarian aspect of what happens there, the why this doesn't work aspect of what happens there, is that now you have an organization, in this case a union, that really can largely do what they want, because the government has made it so that you can't get into entire sectors of the economy without being a member of this specific union. And so what happens is these unions now, people focus on what they do to the business owners. I'm more worried about what they do to the laborers. You hear these situations with laborers, with the people, the actual union members who are paying increasingly large dues. Those dues are being, funneled into political campaigns and political advocacy that often many of the workers or most of the workers do not support, that have absolutely nothing to do with their conditions or anything else. They're just extemporaneous, superfluous political stuff that the union bosses happen to like. So they're basically funneling their workers' money into it. You hear of it being harder for them to get claims dealt with, because the union bosses often work out deals with some of the larger businesses. So they kind of quash anything that comes up sometimes. And there's nothing you can do about it because you have to use the union. So if you want to get into that line of work. So I'm in favor of ending the closed shop situation, the closed shop laws. There's no reason for that. Let's see. New Jersey's lockdown is rumored to be extended until June 1st. What would you and Vermin do if you were in charge? I guess you're asking if we were in charge specifically of New Jersey. Or maybe, no, I guess maybe you're saying on the federal level. Let's talk about why this virus why the United States is one of the most heavily infected countries on the planet right now, despite the fact that we arguably have one of the best healthcare systems, or at least one of the most well-funded healthcare systems, both privately and publicly, and is also the one of the richest countries on earth. We know, the public knew, since at least I believe, second week of January, maybe first week, but early on in January, that this virus existed and that it was more than likely already here just by the nature of how it could spread. Which means the government knew sometime before that. Maybe they only knew a week or a few days before. I've read reports that said that they knew as recently as November. We don't know. Somewhere in between November, the holiday season, and when we found out in January, they knew that this was a thing. It turns out that it's actually easy to make these test kits that they use. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to pretend to know how. But once they have the virus identified, you can easily make test kits and start testing people. And the best way to stop especially a highly virulent pathogen like this from spreading is to test everyone that you possibly can, whether they have symptoms or not, and if the people have symptoms, if the people test positive, then they get treated, and basically, they're able to contain themselves until the symptoms pass and they're okay, and then they can go back out into the general public. Countries like South Korea, Taiwan, countries like that have been successful in stopping it as soon as it came in. Here's what we did. Here's what the U.S. government did. For the first 6 weeks of when we knew that there were cases here, or that there were probably cases here, the CDC kept in place regulations that effectively barred testing for it. Because in order to test for a new virus, you had to go through this Byzantine process of getting an approval, which takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months. Meaning that it could have taken until June for hospitals and healthcare providers to start being able to test. And so you had, for example, there's a very famous doctor now, Dr. Helen Chu, who has become famous for this. She had patients coming in. She's at the University of Seattle, University of Washington, Seattle. She's a doctor. And she had patients coming in who had been to Wuhan, China, who had the symptoms, and who were coming in just out of an abundance of caution to make sure that, they didn't have it. She had the tests made because they're pretty easy to make. They tested them, and some of those results came back positive. She went to the CDC and said, listen, I know we tested illegally without getting approval, but it's going to take too long to get approval. It's already here. We need to do something. The CDC's initial response to her and to some other doctors who did the same thing around the country, they said, that's great. Destroy all those results, destroy the positive, destroy all the tests, destroy the positive results, and tell no one, including the patients. Those doctors, thankfully, again, illegally released the information to the public because they put their Hippocratic oath and their desire to do no harm over whatever stupid regulation was written on a magic sheet of paper from the government that told them that they couldn't do it. And so during that 6-week period, there was almost no testing happening because we were effectively barred from doing it. And you had the president saying it's a hoax or it's not that big of a deal. It's fine. Everything's under control while we're not testing. And it was spreading, pretty rampantly throughout the population without any kind of control. And so now, to overcorrect for that, you now have state governments that are telling everyone stay inside, don't go outside unless it's to all go to the exact same place at the same time to get groceries. And we're going to limit the times you can go there just to make sure you're all there together at the same time because it's dangerous for everyone to be together. So don't do that. And you have police that are out, arresting families that are, going to public places because they're not socially distancing from each other, even though they left the same house. This is a perfect example of when the state gets involved in something, their arbitrary way of doing things, of centrally planning things, makes things worse. And now we have a situation where if this virus is as bad as the experts say it is, once they let everyone back outside, it's just going to start spreading again. So look at all the economic damage that's been done. And I'm not talking economics like, Wall Street's not doing well, because Wall Street got their bailouts. They got $4 trillion in bailouts. It's the working class. It's it's small business owners, people trying to make ends meet that got screwed in all of this. And now they're being told, oh, it's okay, go back outside. And now what? Let's say it is as serious as they say. Now it's going to start spreading again. They're going to shut it down again? Are we going to be playing a game of green light, red light for the next year and a half or 2 years or however long it takes to get a vaccine? All of this could have been avoided if government had simply taken their boot off the neck of the market, the people trying to contain this and fix the problem before it turned into what it is now. Yeah, I definitely need to give shorter answers. Do you support line item legislation, like a line item veto? I think if there's someone in office that can strip out stuff and say, no, this is bad, I generally support that. Do you support repealing all red flag laws? Yes. Easy way to say that. There's no reason for the government to be telling you if you should. I'm going to give a long answer again. Red flag laws are an attempt for the government to tell people whether they have demonstrated that they're too dangerous to be able to own a firearm. If you applied the concept of red flag laws to the government, there isn't a single government that would be seen as qualified to own firearms based on their actions and their words and their deeds and their threats. So I am fully in support of red flag laws for government to apply to itself to say, I guess we need to disarm because we're a bunch of violent sociopaths. How do you feel about the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, suspending the open carry law during the pandemic? I'm supposed to be saying who's asking this. Teresa Jobe, how do you feel about the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, suspending the open carry law during the pandemic? I'm against it. I mean, here you have a situation where people are desperate and an increasing number of people are doing things like breaking and entering, and the police are too busy making sure that no one's at the park, standing 5.5 feet from each other instead of the required 6 feet from each other, which is interesting, because then what they do if they are in non-compliance is they crowd them together in the same cop car and then take them to a jail filled with a bunch of other people so that they can all get COVID-19 at the same time, which is, by the way, that's the state threatening you. They won't come out and say it, but they say basically what they're saying without having to say it is, if you break the law, we will make sure you get infected with COVID-19. I mean, that is as bad a threat. You want to talk about red flag laws, they definitely shouldn't be able to have guns. So in a situation like that, where the police are so busy in making sure everyone who, stood within 6 feet of each other gets infected in the jail, and they're too busy to do that than to, respond to breaking and entering calls, but then to also tell people that they shouldn't be able to carry, breaking and entering, car theft, just general calls that they usually respond to, but also telling people that they can't carry weapons. It's really, and how is open carry causing the virus to spread? What does that have to do with the other? That is a mayor or a politician using a crisis as an excuse to take your guns. Are the police still allowed to open carry? How about that? They're the ones putting people in cages. Why are they able to open carry? What are your ideas as far as eliminating the federal? eliminating Joe Quaz says, what are your ideas as far as eliminating the Federal Reserve and instituting new money? What can we do about it? So I know a lot of libertarians are big fans of the gold standard. And I will say this, the gold standard is markedly better than our current standard, or like a hybrid standard, like gold and silver standard or something like that. That's much better than our current, money machine goes option that we're doing now. I will say, unless we're talking about the Bretton Woods gold standard, in which the government decides how many dollars a ounce of gold is worth, which then is really just another way of devaluing money whenever they want to. I support the elimination of the Federal Reserve, and more importantly, the complete removal of government from the process of issuing currencies. Not only do I want to end the monopoly of government on fiat on currency, I want to end their involvement in it. I want free banking. I want a system, a free market system of banks creating competing currencies, cryptocurrencies, paper currencies. They can chip pieces of gold and hand it to you, whatever they want to give as a form of currency. They may just give you like a card or something, and you use that, and you can have your paycheck put in your account or whatever. However they want to do it, have them create their own systems of currency. Here's why. We talk about inflation, and a lot of people believe that inflation is when the price of things goes up. That's actually not true. That is the side effect of inflation. Inflation is the inflation of the money supply, adding more and more and more money to the money supply, which naturally causes the value of each one of those dollars to go down, because they're printing out money without creating any subsequent value, any additional value when they do it, which causes the price of everything to go down. Inflation, what we call inflation, the constant increase in the cost of living, incremental increase. There may be a year where it only goes up 1 or 2%, and that we consider that a great year. And then there are other years it goes up 10%. We say, oh, that was a bad year. But every day, every year, every month, whatever, the value of your money goes down. And I want to say it's something like a dollar now is worth 2 or 3 cents of what it was worth, of what a dollar was worth when the Federal Reserve was created. That is how much they have taken from you. It is such a constant for several generations now that we just take it as a just a matter of a fact thing. They say there are the only things that are insured are death and taxes. Another one is the cost of living going up. There's no need for that. That's entirely a function of government being involved. Imagine if you had competing currencies that did everything they could to try to drive up the value of that currency through scarcity, through better marketing, through trying to create discount systems with different merchants, that if you use their currency to buy at certain merchants, that you get a discount. All these different things to drive up the value of your money, so that over time, the cost of living actually goes down, or at least stops going up. That's what we could have. We could actually have deflationary policies, which would be good for consumers, good for the vast majority of people to have that type of thing in place. And that's all with what I call free banking. And free banking doesn't mean they don't charge you. Free banking means a free market system of banking. What's your favorite dinosaur? Thank you. Because I was just talking to someone about, when I was a kid, people would ask me this: what's your favorite dinosaur? What's your favorite animal? And I would tell them, I was very excited to tell them that pterodactyl is my favorite dinosaur because it can fly. And then there's another one that I forget its name, but pterodactyl was the one I knew because it could fly. And I haven't been asked that since I was like maybe 8 or 9. By the time I was 10, no one really cared what my favorite dinosaur was anymore. So that is definitely my favorite dinosaur. Joseph Tintel, and if I say your name wrong, I apologize. Would you support removing federal drug laws and support sales taxation for drug and recreational purposes? Yes and no. I do not support any taxes. I believe that if government is to exist, if there is a need for government, then that means there is a demand for its services. If there's a demand for its services, then they can supply it and charge for those specific services, whatever those are that people will magically want. And if government doesn't have a demand and cannot be funded entirely on voluntary fees, direct fees for services, then it's not fit to exist. It means it's a violent monopoly that imposes itself on all of us, and basically holds a gun to our head to charge us. So no, I don't support the sales taxes. I do support removing all federal drug laws, and I would encourage the states to do the same. It is no one's business what you put in your body. And it is no one's business what kind of commerce you do, giving money in exchange for the drugs, or selling the drugs, or exchanging drugs in exchange for a barter system, whatever. It's none of their business. It's none of their business. I had answered this question before. Joseph Tintel asked another question. What are your views about utilizing the FDA for testing all foods, supplements, and drugs used for American and American family pet consumption? I think that it hasn't really done a tremendous amount of good compared to before it was in place. And I think that the standard is that anyone who's owned a business, which I have, knows that one of the worst ways to do business is to poison your customers. That's just I made websites, so it would be really hard for me to poison my customers. But even still, if there had been a way that my website would have poisoned customers, I would have absolutely avoided that at every step. And so I think that you don't need to have, what the FDA has done is created a system now whereby if you have a new drug that you want to put into the market, they've created a system that takes years, sometimes decades, and costs billions of dollars. But if you're connected, if you're a lobbyist that's connected with government, you don't have to pay those billions of dollars. They'll make the taxpayer pay that. So the FDA has basically become a slush fund for big pharma to push drugs through the testing system without having to pay for it. And so they've externalized that cost to you. Why? Do you get to have it for free afterwards? No, you have to pay for it. You already paid for it to be tested. Now you have to pay for it to actually get it if you need it. That doesn't make much sense. So no, I would get rid of that. What are your views about maintaining a large and powerful military? I think that we have seen the result of that. I think if a military is to exist, if we are to decide the minarchist argument that we should have a government to protect us from invasion, that's all it needs to be used for. We have a gigantic military industrial complex that is going around the world, murdering people in your name in unimaginable countless levels. And then we now see, we every few years we find out that yet again the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon have been funding insurgent groups, which just happened to turn out to be terrorist groups a few years later, when they turn on us because they decide they don't want to fight for us anymore. Now they want to fight against us. And we use their existence of the organization that our government created to continue bombing and destabilizing entire countries and regions, which then causes them to have to flee those countries and move into Europe and North America and places that we won't bomb or destabilize. And then that causes all of because it's not just a natural reaction of people moving for economic reasons, which is a natural flow of things that's been going on for as long as people have had commerce with one another, and it's instead this mad rush to get away from something that we've done to people and destabilize their country. So now they're fleeing, and it's happening here. Most of the Central American immigrants now they're not coming from Mexico anymore. They're coming from Central and South America. They're fleeing countries that have been destabilized and not bombed so much on this side, but destabilized by the U.S. government. That is all a side effect of us having a large and powerful military. If we're to have a military, it should exist for defense. We should bring all of those troops home, and not just from the hot zones. There's no reason for us to be occupying South Korea. There's no reason for us to be occupying Germany or Japan. There's no reason for any of that. Bring the troops home and decommission them, or at least no new reenlistments. But I would say decommission all but just the absolute minimum needed to required to defend against this invasion that we're told is going to come any second now. Chris Reynolds asks, are you more comfortable showing chest hair in a libertarian crowd, or do you get risque for anyone? Listen, when you are as hairy as me, it doesn't really matter whether you want to show chest hair or not. Like, unless I am shaving this thing out, I could wear it like this. It's going to pop up through here. I have essentially a body beard, right? So this is sort of a Team Hobbit situation. I can shave up here. Unless I'm just shaving it out here, there's nothing I can do about it. So I have made peace with that since, I thought it was cool when I was already getting chest hair in my early teens. Turns out that was an indicator of things to come, because it's just, okay, not much I can do about it. But in terms of comfort, I have embraced my full body, especially my chest beard, but my full body beard persona that I have now. It is who I am. I'm fine with it. If I'm not campaigning or doing one of these shows, I'm probably not wearing a shirt. Let's see. Joseph Tintle asks, how do you feel about conceal carry permits? Universal conceal carry permits. I think that people should be able to carry a weapon without any permission from government. The problem with this idea of universal concealed carry is that is a de facto national gun owner registry. The people who propose that never really say that. You sign up and say, I'd like to be able to conceal carry. And now every state in the union and possibly the federal government now knows that. Wherever you go. That's basically the beginning of a gun registry. And once that's in place, the next step will be, well, you'll need to tell us what guns you have so that we can decide if you can have it in every state. The state shouldn't be involved at all. You should be able to own a weapon, carry a weapon. There is nothing, it's like the constitutionalists say, what part of shall not be infringed do you not understand? I go even further because I don't care what the magic parchment says. What I care about is what our individual self-ownership and bodily autonomy say. If we own ourselves, we own our lives, we own our bodies, then there's absolutely no reason that, and we own our property, there's absolutely no reason that the government should be able to tell us whether we should have guns or not. If they want to disarm for the safety of people, since they're the ones who are killing most of the people, that's fine. I'm fine with them disarming. Joseph Tintle again, how do you feel about mail-in voting and voter ID? I think that I understand the need to make sure that people who are voting are the people that they say they are. My understanding is that the claims of voter fraud are pretty exaggerated. I'm actually don't have a problem with mail-in voting. I'll tell you right now, dealing with this pandemic, how many people are going to want to go out? If this thing's still going and we're being told that we can't go out, we shouldn't even go to the beach. Don't go to the beach. Go to the store between the hours of 8 and 6, like everyone else is, because that's the only place anyone can go. That's definitely safe, but don't go to the beach. But then they're going to say, but everyone, let's all at the same day go to a handful of places to touch the same voting booth, the same buttons in the same voting booth at the same time, and stay in line with each other for, in some cases, hours at a time if you're in a major metro area. It might need to be mail-in. I'm not sure. Cameron Kogan, Dr. Chu is a national hero. Would you and Vermin consider erecting a monument in her honor once elected? Sure. If someone wants to pay for that, we would definitely attend the ribbon cutting. Sure. Brandon Kronbusch. So what if someone doesn't want the vaccine? Okay, I am against forced vaccines. I tend to be of the belief, and I know I'm going to get attacked now, I tend to be of the belief that vaccines are safe and that they are indeed effective for what they say they are. I myself don't usually get the flu shot just because it's only usually 40 to 60% likely to keep you from getting the flu because there are so many different strains. That's a personal choice I make. If anyone chooses to get the flu shot, that's fine. If there is a vaccine for this, and it's still, and by then we'll have an idea of just how, if it really is, we're dealing with a lot of incomplete data here. And so we're getting a lot of different narratives about how dangerous or not dangerous it is, and how many people already have it or not. By the time a vaccine came out, we'd have a much more complete picture. And based on that, if the picture was saying that it's as dangerous as it says it is, and I hadn't already gotten it by then, I probably would take the vaccine. But that's none of anyone's business. And you have a situation. I did a walking tour in New York City with Deborah Altman, who is the first and only elected libertarian in New York City. She's on a council there. And we walked through Manhattan and we saw how people are living there and got to talk to people and stuff. And one of the things she talked about is how in New York State, they are moving hard to take children from parents who won't get them vaccinated. And they are, in the past, they used to allow the doctors to give out exemptions for religious reasons or health reasons, because there are some people that for health reasons can't get the vaccine. They're immunocompromised. They have some other condition that if they take a certain type of vaccine, it'll make them really sick. But the doctors aren't giving out the exemptions. You know why? Because then they won't get their license renewed. They're getting notices from the state saying, if you give out too many of these exemptions, we're not going to let you renew your license when it comes up, or we may even take your license from you. But they don't say how much too many is. So now you just have doctors who are scared to give any exemptions, even if they need them. It's none of anyone's business what you do or do not put in your body. And so, no, I would not support mandating of vaccines. Do you support auditing and ending the Federal Reserve? I support, as I said before, Eric, I support ending the Federal Reserve, ending the government involvement in the issuance of currency, and letting free market banking and free market currency issuing give us a much better form of money that will actually gain in value over time. JC Cook, have you read the Libertarian platform? And if so, how long did it take you? And did it require extensive study to determine if you agreed with it? I did read it. I've read it a few times, actually, and I've read through it occasionally a few times, just certain parts that I was looking for a clarification on. I believe it took me about, don't hold me on this, but I think it took about 15 minutes to read, 10, 15 minutes to read. Long before I even joined the party, I read it to decide, because I believe that if you're joining a party, especially if you're going to join a party and run for president or vice president, that you should probably read the platform and decide if you're joining an organization whose beliefs and principles you support. And so I did. I read the statement of principles. I read the platform and the preamble and all that, but I read the platform. I looked through it, and then and after looking through it, I determined that I pretty much as close to 100% agreed with everything on there, and that is why I am a member of the Libertarian Party. I am both a small L and large L libertarian. Let's see here. There are so many questions here. I'm sure I'm skipping over. Michael Pacione says over or under 10% of the popular vote. Oh, that we'll get. I think with Vermin Supreme on the ticket, that we have the potential to get over 10%. I believe that we have the potential to score high enough in the opinion polls to get him on the debate stage, because on the sheer, just simply on the sheer messaging of saying, hey, everyone who is disgusted with your options of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, how would you like to have Vermin Supreme, the time-traveling wizard, on the debate stage with Joe Biden and Donald Trump? Let's imagine a reality where Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Vermin Supreme are on a debate stage, and the only one of the three of them who's able to form a coherent sentence is a man with a boot on his head. I would pay to see that. So I think that would give us well over 10% of the popular vote. I'm seeing some... Joe Quas, how would you and Vermin address the national debt? First thing I would do is most of the national debt is owed to the Federal Reserve at this point. They print out money and buy T-bonds with it. I would cancel all of that. I think government-to-government debt should be canceled. There are situations where the states own federal debt and the federal government owns state debt. Although usually it's just the states owning the federal debt. Governments claiming to owe governments money and charging people for it is inherently an immoral act. It is a hostage taker who is running. It would be the equivalent of someone holding you hostage and getting mortgages and car loans and credit cards in your name. It's completely immoral, should not exist, and should be ended. I think that alone would knock the national debt down quite a bit. And then the other way to knock it down would be to stop spending money on bad things, which is the vast majority, if not all, of what government spends money on. But that's more of a long-term thing. But I think immediately you could deal with it by canceling debt that's owed by government to government that you have to pay for. Chris Reynolds, how do you feel about Justin Amash and possibly running for president as a libertarian? Well, he is, as far as I can tell, he is running for a libertarian. I question the motives of someone whose only we're told that Justin Amash has had no involvement with the Libertarian Party up until the middle of last week. That's actually not true. Justin Amash has quite a bit of history with the Libertarian Party of Michigan. He every time they have a convention, he sends a ton of people there to vote none of the above for anyone who tries to get nominated to run against him for his congressional seat. So he actually does have a history of the Libertarian Party, hamstringing them for his own personal political ambitions. So I would say that I would be completely against. I am not a fan of him entering. I am a fan of him or anyone else becoming a member. I think it is fantastic that a sitting member, for now, of Congress is becoming a member of the Libertarian Party. He recently said that he hasn't read our platform yet. He recently gave an interview on MSNBC where he presented a non-libertarian argument for voting for him. He just kept saying that he's a fresh new third voice and that the Democrats and Republicans aren't representing people, which is true, but he didn't really give a lot of reason for why to vote for him, other than these sort of platitudes about being a new fresh voice. Okay, that's been said before. People aren't going to jump off of their existing party or start voting because of that. And it actually reached a point where an MSNBC reporter had to tell him that what he was talking about and proposing didn't sound a lot like small limited government. Ouch. Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to know that he was interested in growing the party or having anything to do with our strategy moving forward up until a week ago, when he had publicly exhausted literally every other option he had and made it clear that after having, because he also did an interview with the Libertarian Republic, where he made it clear that he made this decision painstakingly after having exercised every other possible option that he could have possibly taken. He then said, all right, fine, I'll run for president as a libertarian. That's exciting, huh? Let's see. How do you feel about... Oh, it's the same question. Chris Reynolds, favorite R&B group of the 90s? Man. Favorite of the 90s? I mean, I kind of want to say Boys to Men, but that's too easy. Yeah, of the early 2000s, it's a lot different. Of the 90s, favorite R&B. I know I'm going to regret this. I'm going to think of one from the 90s and say, oh crap, I should have said that. 80s, I could have told you it would be DeBarge. I know someone's going to find that really funny. The 90s, first thing that's coming to my head is Boys to Men. Oh, Jodeci. Thank you. Whatever Forrest Gump. Jodeci, favorite of the 90s. How important is it to have a fresh strategy? JC Cook is asking, how important is it to have a fresh strategy in trying to break the two-party monopoly? And could you give examples of your personal strategy? Hey, thanks, JC. Yeah, so we've already seen how not to do this. We've seen how to unsuccessfully convince the public to vote for a third party. Let's be clear, first of all, about what a campaign for a third party is. When you are going to a voter and presenting to them a third party candidacy, you are inviting them to vote for a party and a candidate who statistically is likely to lose. Right? Like they're probably going to lose, at the lower levels, at city council, at things like that, the odds of them winning goes up, but even then they're still statistically likely to lose at the federal or state level. I mean, for example, the Libertarian Party in its 49-year history has never won a single statewide or federal election. No president, no governor, no attorney general, no congressman, no U.S. Senate, none of that. They've only won a very small handful of state legislative positions. So, when we are asking someone to vote for us, we are asking them to vote for a ticket that is likely to lose. So if you do the strategy that we've been doing, where we say, when we're asked what the Libertarian Party is, we give these platitudes and say, well, the Republicans and the Democrats aren't listening to you, but we're listening to you because we care and we're great and we have such great ideas. Don't say what they are, but we have such great ideas. And really, we're kind of the best parts of the Republicans and the Democrats. If you think about it, we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal. In other words, the message you're saying is we're kind of like those two parties, except better. Well, here's what the voter hears. Here are the two options the voter hears. They can continue voting Democrat or Republican, who doesn't really represent them and isn't really that great, but they're likely to win. They at least have a chance of winning. And then the other option that you've presented is this sexy new party, in this case, the Libertarian Party, that sounds like they're actually kind of represent me a little bit more, and they sound like they care about me a little bit more, and they have almost no chance of winning. We see what people choose. The vast majority of voters, something like 97 to 99% of them, are going to vote strategically based on what you have presented them, the offer you've presented them, if they've even heard it. The offer that you've presented is we're better-ish, we're somewhat better, but again, we have very little likelihood of winning. They're not going to do it. That's how you get 1%. That's how you get 2%, 3%, or even less than 1% in some cases, in many cases. That's not a winning strategy. In order to win, in order to, even before you win, start getting serious vote totals. You know, we talk about 5% like it's this mythical thing that we can never get. 5% should be beyond our low water mark. In order for, in a three-way race to win, you usually have to get at least 35 to 40% of the vote, realistically, especially in an electoral college situation where you have to make sure you've gotten enough votes in enough of the states to win the electoral college. Yeah, 35, 40% we should be going for. If we're to get anywhere near that, if we're to ever even break into double digits, we can't keep using that strategy. The strategy we have to use is to present them with an actual third option, or in my mind, a second option, because there's so little daylight between the Republicans and the Democrats that now I just call them the Republicrats, because they're essentially the same thing. They're all going to give you endless war, endless taxation, endless putting people in prison for victimless crimes, endless subjugation, endless. Look how the Republicans and Democrats have held hands in botching this pandemic and then locking everyone in their homes and telling them they can't go anywhere as a result. They have been hand in hand on that. They engage in theater to make it look like they're fighting. They're not fighting. They sure signed up all those universal income for billionaire bills that they passed, where you might get $1,200 in a few weeks, but the billionaires got their billions instantly. So they all work together. So we need to present an actual, real, viable alternative. And you don't do that by presenting moderate half measures. You do that by listening to their concerns, arguing from their precepts, and presenting your solutions for that idea. Win their hearts and minds by demonstrating you care and by listening to what they have to say and talking about your solutions from their precepts. You'll have their hearts and minds, and you can share with them the full, honest libertarian platform. Instead of hiding parts of the platform that some of us might think are too scary for people to see, we present why we believe it, because it is the correct way. Let me give you an example of how I did this. So I have done, as I said at the beginning of this, when people were still tuning in, I've gone to housing projects, I've gone to college campuses, I've gone to middle-class neighborhoods, lower middle-class neighborhoods, some upper middle-class neighborhoods. I've talked to individuals, campuses, groups, large and small. Since we've been locked down, I've been doing Zoom calls with different university classes, talking to students. These are the people who are forming their opinions that they're going to use to shape their voting ideas, or if they run for office, their policy ideas for the next 60, 70, 80 years. And I'm talking to them in where they are in their classes, and I'm listening to what they have to say. But here's what I've done in the colleges. These were left-leaning colleges. These were people that thought government is good. They may have a problem with specific things that government does, but they think government overall is good. And so I talked to them. I'd start with a simple question. Do you own yourself? And I got all sorts of different answers. Of course, I own myself. No one owns themselves. Everything in between. But we'd start a conversation about self-ownership and what that means. Then I would ask them, what do you think of government? And almost all of them said, yeah, I don't like government doing this or that or this or that, but I think overall we need a government. Government's good. We should be strengthening the government. We should be reforming parts of the government, but we need more government. And then I would say, that's interesting. So you're in college. What's your biggest concern right now? And almost all of them, student debt. I'm worried about my student debt. Or they'd say, I'm worried about if when I get out of college, I'll be able to find a job a career in my, in what I want to do, if I'll be able to find something to pay off my student debt, basically, or just to live on. And I'd say, okay, what are you majoring in? And they tell me whatever it is. And I'd say, cool. Why are you majoring in that? Almost all of them said the same thing, because I need to major in that in order to work, to get the degree, to then get the licensing to work in my chosen field of work. And I'd say, cool, that's awesome. Let me ask you something. What if instead of doing all that, you could simply do a internship or or apprenticeship under people who are already doing what you want to do for a living, and instead of having to run up all this student debt and spend 4 to 8 years in school, you could simply do your you could apprentice under these people and learn from them, and either do it for free or for a small stipend, but you're not running up debt. You're not having to pay for it. And after probably a year or two, they would determine that, you had met whatever their standards were to be able to work in their chosen field. And then you could start doing it, and you could start doing it for money. And they all said, that's a great idea, but I can't do it. And I'd say, why? And they'd say, because I got to get my degree. And I'd say, why? And they say, because if I don't get a degree, I can't get my license. And I said, why? And that's when it hit them, because government had robbed them of their self-ownership and their autonomy to be able to engage in a voluntary way to learn how to do it. They had to use this arbitrary, centrally planned way that just so happened to help all the lobbyists who helped write all these rules, and all these special interests and cronies who wrote these rules, forcing them to go through this process and run up all this debt. And we signed up a ton of people to the Libertarian Party. And more importantly, we changed the conversation in those communities, in those housing, and we've done this in the housing projects and everything else. We've changed that in all of those communities. And the way that you do that is arguing from their precepts and then sharing the entire libertarian message, a principled radical message, not half measures, not scared pool, sharing the whole message. I'm being told that there's a time call. We have gone past my hour that I have for this. And so I will be actually addressing these questions. If they are in the comments on the Facebook, I will be going later and answering each of these questions. But I encourage you, if you have any other questions that haven't been asked, I encourage you to go to either my Twitter at Real Spike Cohen, or my Facebook, which is if you put it in the address bar, it's facebook.com/literally Spike Cohen. Or you can go, if you're searching in the Facebook search bar, it's Spike Cohen, your next VP, and reach out to me and ask me whatever question you have. I would be more than happy to answer it. And like I said, I will be going through these questions, and I will be going through these questions and answering any of the ones that I didn't get to individually. But I do thank you for your time. And I encourage you to find out more by going to my social media. You can go to verminsupreme2020.com to see what Vermin is all about. And we have to reach, the last thing I want to share with you before I let you go is that we have to get away from corporate media's trap for third-party candidates. They tell us if we dress the right way and we act respectably and we go up and answer their stupid questions, that they'll give us a seat at the table. They won't. They'll give us just enough attention to say that they did it, and they'll do everything they can to make us, to discredit us and make us look like we're idiots, because they have a vested corporate interest in keeping their favored Republican politicians in place. So you have to go around it. You have to completely subvert that process. How? By appealing to their profit motive. They have to get views so that they make a profit from ad revenue. So you give them a spectacle to look at. They give that spectacle to the public. You bring the public in. And then when you have their attention, you share the actual message. Once you've already got, George Carlin would do this. He would do his stand-up routines and he'd be so silly and funny and goofy and whatever else. And then once he was done with that, once about halfway through, he wasn't even telling jokes anymore. He was just hitting them with anti-establishment propaganda. And then he'd usually end it with some jokes and, so that people remembered this was a comedy routine. But he got their attention and he lowered their cognitive defenses by telling jokes. And then he'd hit them with stuff that they never even would have wanted to listen to if he had started with that. And so that's what we're doing. We start with humor. We start with goodwill. We get them in just to see the spectacle. And then we start hitting them with the real thing. And we share with them an inspirationally disruptive message, the libertarian message. You own yourself, your life, your body, your labor, and your property. And we will stand with you by your side and fight against anyone who tries to take those things from you. So I would appreciate you reaching out to my social media. Again, I will be answering any questions that I didn't have a chance to answer. I'll be answering them in the comments. And I do appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your evening. And thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate it.